Today, I'm going to show you the basic equipment that I use when I am frosting and assembling my cake. So maybe you're just a hobby baker and you want to get the right tools for you to maybe improve your skills, or maybe you want to get into the home baking business and you want a basic list of tools that you might need in order to frost and stack and assemble a cake. I'm going to go over those basics with you today. Now, this is not a complete list. These are just kind of the basics that I feel are most important or might help you the most throughout your cake baking journey. And I will have the link to hopefully all of them down in the description below. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so the first item that I'm going to show you today is my electronic scale. I like to use a scale as I feel like I get a much more consistent product across all of my batches rather than measuring it out by a cup or half a cup or whatever it may be. Especially if you're a home baker and you want a consistent product across all of your items, an electronic scale will definitely help you get good measurements and consistency across your baked goods. The second item that I want to show you is my cake pan. So I use round cake pans for all of my cakes. I typically will buy one size in a quantity of 3. The reason for that is I like to pop all of my layers into the oven at once, and since my cakes have a standard of 3 layers of cakes per each cake, I find that having 3 cake pans makes the process go a little bit faster than if I were to bake each layer one by one. The brand that I use is Daddios. I use them for my cake pans, my cupcake pans. They're really good quality product. So the third item that I like to use is parchment paper. I use parchment paper on the bottom of my cake pans before I put my batter in. So this will help your cake layers release from the pan and not break or crumble as you're trying to get them out of the pan after you had baked them. So I just buy a roll of parchment paper. I get this at Costco, but I will just tear off a piece and then I'll cut it into the shape of the cake pan, so a circular shape, and then I'll just put it down in the bottom of the cake pan before I put my batter in to bake it. Alright, so this next item that I'm going to show you is my KitchenAid stand mixer. Now, you don't need this. You could get away from with a hand mixer, especially if you're a hobby baker and you're just needing it every now and then. A hand mixer will do just fine. But I love my stand mixers. They make the job so much easier and faster, and I don't have to worry about holding that mixer while I'm mixing up my batter, especially when I'm doing buttercream. So stand mixers, totally worth the investment. Now, I started off with this 4.5 quart when I started baking as a home baker, and I quickly found that this was a little too small for me, so I upgraded pretty quick to a bigger size. So if you're looking at becoming a home baker, you're going to be doing large batch quantities or maybe a high volume, I would definitely look into getting as big of a stand mixer as you can afford. So I really like KitchenAid's brand. I use a paddle attachment for the most part on a lot of my batches. Now, if you're making like a whipped cream or a royal icing, you might want your whisk attachment. For the most part, I do use a paddle attachment when I'm making my batches. Now that we've kind of gone over the basics for you to make your cake batter, weighing out your batter and putting it in your cake pan to be able to bake, the next tools that I'm going to show you are for when I am frosting and assembling my cake. The next thing that I'm going to show you is my cake turntable. So the one that I have here, it's an Ateco. It's an Ateco 612. I have only used the Ateco before. I haven't used any other brands, and I haven't felt a need to go to any other brands. This one is very sturdy. It's very heavy. It spins really nicely and evenly. I haven't had any issues with this. It also comes with a little non-slip mat, so you can put your cake on top of it so it doesn't slide around especially if you're working with a lighter cake, like a 4-inch or a 6-inch. That non-slip mat may be beneficial for you. The next tool that I'm going to show you is my serrated knife. I use my serrated knife when I'm getting my cake layers level. So I'll take my knife and I will just cut off the top of the cake layers to get them nice and level while I'm stacking and assembling my cakes. When I'm cutting my cake layers, I typically will do them after I have frozen them. The reason I do it when they're frozen is when you're cutting them, you might have crumbs that tend to fall off of your cake, and if they're frozen, it'll help keep those crumbs in and you won't have as many crumbs falling off or maybe your cake falling apart. So if you're having trouble with that, pop it in the freezer for a little bit before you try and cut the tops of your cakes off. The next 2 items that I'm going to show you are my offset spatulas. So I have two different sizes of offset spatulas that I use. Both of these are Wilton brand. So I have a larger size and a smaller size. For the most part, I use my larger offset spatula, especially when I'm doing that first layer of icing onto my cake and kind of just grabbing big globs of it and putting it onto the cake. I really more so use this one when I'm not too concerned about how the icing is going to look on my cake. It's less detailed. You don't have as much control with this larger one as you do with a smaller one. So the smaller one I use for more of a detailed look. If I'm trying to get a crisp, concise look on my cake, like the top of my cake, I'll use my smaller one. This one will give me a little bit more control than that bigger one will. So the last item that I have here is my bench scraper. This is an OXO brand. It's only about 6 inches tall, so if you're doing cakes over 6 inches, you might want one that's a little bit taller. But this one is really heavy, it's sturdy. When I'm making my cakes, as I'm rotating them and trying to get that nice smooth surface on the edges and sides of my cake, I'll use my bench scraper to scrape off that excess icing. This one is definitely beneficial. And with that, that was the basic equipment that I personally use to make my cake batter, frost, and assemble my cakes. If you're looking at purchasing any of the items that I showed you today, the links are down in the description so you could get them to start your own cake decorating and baking journey. But if you could please like this video and subscribe to my channel to keep an eye out for future content, and I will see you next time. Thanks!